But, you know, in the summer, it's just like, years ago, when I was on Spirit Jack, because I came up in front of
Good morning. Time to go. As soon as Ralph sits down, we can get started. And Dick. I think you can get your own copy.
Well, thank you. I feel
Anymore.
privileged.
There's Miss Sylvia Valley. Give her a copy. All right. Time to go. Sacred Gifts and Holy Gatherings, February 5th. So a new month. This is our final month of the quarter. Don't know what we'll do next quarter. I don't know. Do you know, Gordon?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We will be in consultation.
In consultation. All right. So this is the Passover. Lesson number 10. So 10 of 13. So we're on part 3 now. The Holy Gatherings. Last month was 4 weddings and a funeral. So we'll be doing here the Passover, Feast of Weeks, Day of Atonement, and Feast of Booths. This covers the 3 feasts that the Jews were to commemorate along with a Day of Atonement. And as you see here, the first one, lesson 10, is in Exodus, and the other 3 are in Leviticus. And the first one here actually happens before the Exodus. So this is the one that was started while they were still in the land of Egypt. So Passover was in conjunction with the 10th plague. And since we did the plagues, or Exodus, last quarter, how was the 10th plague different? What?
More severe.
More severe?
It affected humans.
It affected humans. Anything else?
Death.
Death?
It was more personal, and it touched something that was closer to their hearts than any of the other plagues.
Yes.
Been.
And
Killing your firstborn child.
yes. And this, you had to actually do something. The 4th through the 9th plagues didn't affect Israel, but the 10th would affect them if they did not obey the instructions to get out of that, to get out of the death of the firstborn in your household. Okay, Exodus 12, first 2 verses, the Passover. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt. So we're in the land of Egypt. The Passover has not yet happened yet. They're not they haven't left Egypt yet. So the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this is a little bit unusual. There are 82 times where the Lord in the Pentateuch speaks to Moses. And only 6 times where he includes Aaron. So this must be important. He's including both of them. They need to get the message out. They need to get it out fast. This is an important message, life or death. Literally life or death message that Moses and Aaron need to get out to the people. This month shall be for you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year for you. So he's talking about this month here, not this particular day, but the month they're in. The month they're in began with the new moon festival. So that's where we are. So here's your picture here, and now you see why I gave you a handout, right? Can you read that?
Yes.
Okay. Gordon can read it. I can read it too from here.
Yeah.
All right, so where are we today? We're on today, right? February 5th, 2023. So going clockwise, what's the next holiday? Purim. That's in Esther chapter 9, 32. Familiar with that. And 6-7 March. It seems like it's 2 days. But it's actually 1 day because remember their day began at sundown and then continued. So it's actually 1 day going from sundown till the next day. Purim. If you want to read about that, that's in the book of Esther, chapter 9, verses 32. That's where they cast the lots. And then we have Passover. That's our subject of our lesson today. And that'll be this year, the 5th through the 13th of April. The 5th will be Passover, and then 6th through the 13th of April is the unleavened bread, Feast of the Unleavened Bread and First Fruits. Okay, then we come to Pentecost and First Fruits. Well, okay, the word here is Pesach. That's the Hebrew name for the festival of Passover. Then we come to Pentecost and First Fruits, which was Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, or sometimes called Pentecost, and then First Fruits. Well, we see we have 2 first fruits here. The difference, the first fruits for Passover is the first fruits of the barley crop. The first fruits for Pentecost is the first fruits of the wheat crop. And then Whitsun, the actual Sunday, the first day of the week, is called Whitsun. So we have Shavuot, Feast of Weeks, Pentecost. Okay, then we move down. They get a break from these through the summer and early part of fall. And then we have the Feast of Trumpets, or called Rosh Hashanah, which means head of the year, the beginning of their... So now they have a new beginning of the year, different from the one there in the month of Islam. And this is the Feast of Trumpets. Well, actually, they blew the trumpets on every new moon, the beginning of every new month, which is the new moon festival. And then we have Yom Kippur, 24th through 25 September, the most holy day in the Hebrew calendar, the Day of Atonement. That's the one day when Aaron, the high priest, went into the most holy place in the temple. And then Sukkot, or Feast of Tabernacles, also called Feast of Ingathering, because at this time the agricultural year is over with, and they have gathered all their crops in. Specifically, the last crops that they'll gather in are olives and figs. Now, sometime about right in here is when they would gather the grapes, but olives and figs here, and then the ground would lie fallow through the winter time. And then we have the Feast of Dedication. Not mentioned in Scripture as we have it. It's mentioned in 2 Maccabees chapter 10, verse 8. And it is mentioned in the New Testament. Jesus did come to the Feast of Dedication. John has it, and he says that this happens during winter. This celebrates, it's an 8-day feast, and it celebrated the rededication of the temple and the altar after the defilement by the Syrians under Antiochus Epiphanes. And they only had enough oil for their menorah to last for 1 day. But it actually lasted for 8 days. So they considered this a miracle from God. And Judas Maccabeus said, from now on, we're going to celebrate this. And since it wasn't dictated by God, they said, we're just going to follow the same rules we had for the Feast of Tabernacles. So that's how they did that. Okay, Easter. Why didn't they have Easter in there? Yeah, they didn't celebrate Easter, but look where it falls. Right in between the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Exactly halfway in between. That's unusual. That doesn't happen all the time. Next year, well here, let's see, Passover, Easter happens 4 days after Passover. Next year, Easter will happen 3 weeks before Passover. So quite a bit different timing there. And then these are the 3 feasts that the Jews were commanded to keep. Feast of Unleavened Bread, Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles. But nowadays there's a total of 7 that they do keep. And these are the ones that Jesus attended: Passover, Tabernacles, and he was there for the Feast of Dedication. And I think we can also give him credit for being there for Easter Sunday, right?
Oh, yes.
Sort of important. Okay, the name. It's derived from the word Pesach, which means to pass over. And it comes from 3 different verses, verse 13, 23, and 27 in Exodus chapter 12. So there you see Passover, pass through, Passover. Okay, so why did the Lord speak both to Moses and to Aaron? He says, tell the congregation, I need you to tell the congregation, this is an imperative of Israel, that on the 10th day of the month, every man shall take a lamb according to his father's houses. So we got 2 men here, and they're telling this to the congregation of Israel. Remember last quarter, how many people are they going to be telling this to? Alan, that was your class. Alex. 600,000 men plus women and children. Didn't we come out like 1.5 million, something like that? Yep. So we are already in the month. We're already in the month, and they have until the 10th of the month to get out the word to 1.5 million people. They didn't have a recall roster. They couldn't call, they couldn't email, they couldn't text. They needed to get the word out. So he told both Moses and Aaron. They probably would have gone to each of the tribal leaders, to the elders, and then telling them what they needed to do and how important it was that they get this done. Get the word out before the 10th of the month. So they should take a lamb according to their father's houses, a lamb for each household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, or what is too small for a lamb, or how big is a lamb? And if the household is too small, then he and his nearest neighbor shall get together according to the number of persons, according to what each can eat, you shall make your count for the lamb. So if they had teenage boys, they could probably eat more. Now, how many people did you need? This is from Josephus. Of course, he was in the 1st century. So this is during the Second Temple period. And he said you needed to have a minimum of 10 people. A minyan. That's also the need for, in order to have a synagogue. So you need to have 10 participants to take the Passover meal. So if you don't have that many in your family, and you invite your neighbor, and then when they slaughter the Passover lambs, you have to do it in groups of 30. This was the rule. He's writing end of the 1st century AD. He says, your lamb shall be without blemish, a male, a year old. This is the first time it's mentioned that the lamb had to be without blemish. Go back 1,000 years or more, time of Abel. He took a firstborn lamb and the fat portion. No mention without blemish. Noah, his sacrifice. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No mention of being without blemish until this time. You may take it from the sheep or the goats. You shall keep it until the 14th day of this month. So take it on the 10th. Keep it until the 14th, when the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill their lambs at twilight. Twilight. This actually takes 3 Hebrew words to describe what twilight is. We know what twilight is, don't we? The word, here's the 3 Hebrew words, and it actually means between. It's only mentioned 10 times in Scripture, but it refers to the time between sunset and evening. So after sunset, but before it gets dark, is when you should do this. Then they shall take some of the blood and pass it over the two doorposts and the lintel of the houses in which they eat it. They shall eat the flesh that night, roasted on the fire. With unleavened bread and bitter herbs shall they eat it, or they shall eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled in water, but it has to be roasted, its head with its legs and its inner parts. So it looks like they removed the fleece and everything, moved the fleece, but everything else. Well, they do drain the blood and put that in a basin, but they roast it with the internal organs. Don't eat it raw. It has to be roasted. So how long does it take to roast a lamb? Probably longer than to fix a turkey in the oven, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So probably more than
An air fryer.
Yeah. So you shall let none of it remain until the morning. Anything that remains until the morning, you shall burn. Now some people say, well, they ate it with the staff and everything, and they were going to leave that night. Well, we'll see a couple of passages here that says they did not leave that night. They were ordered not to leave that night. If you leave that night, how do you burn it in the morning? Okay. So, picture a 1-year-old male lamb. Is this bigger or smaller than you pictured?
Bigger.
Yeah, I thought it'd be little, you know. This is a 1-year-old male lamb. I think the picture was taken at a county or a state fair.
Texas, probably.
Probably Texas. Bigger in Texas. So maybe this is bigger than the lambs they had back then, but it weighs 120 pounds, yields 60 to 72 pounds of meat. So if you got 10 people, you're going to eat 7.2 pounds. And then you're going to make a long trip. All right. Okay, so here's a picture. Only shows men for some reason. Where are the women? It shows their staff and everything. So in this manner, Lord tells them, this is how you're eating it. Well, we're adults. We know how to eat, don't we? Well, he gives them away. You're going to have your belts fastened. You're going to have your sandals on your feet. Your staff is going to be in your hand, so you can only eat with one hand. And you shall eat it in haste. Eat with one hand. Think about like the soldiers during Gideon's time. They had to drink with one hand. They got to eat with one hand and keep the staff there. It is the Lord's Passover. For I will pass through the land of Egypt that night, and I will strike all the firstborn of the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and on all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgments. I am the Lord. Remember the class we had on Wednesday night a couple of years ago against the gods of Egypt? So he's going to execute judgment upon, Pharaoh, the Egyptians, and on all the gods of Egypt. All these plagues I'm going to afflict upon the people. The gods of Egypt are not going to be able to stand against me. The blood shall be a sign for you. What were we studying in John the last couple of weeks? Signs. Now signs do not have to be, we said signs don't have to be miracles. The blood shall be a sign for you, and it'll be a sign for the Lord's. He will not inflict death upon the firstborn. For you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and no plague shall befall you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, as a statute forever. You shall keep this feast forever. Now, why did the Lord need to see the blood? Didn't he know his own people? So why did the Lord even go over Goshen? Was this a sign of obedience? Remember, the Sabbath was a sign of obedience. Don't gather it on the Sabbath. What did the people do? They went out and did it. Now that was before it was a commandment. After it was a commandment, the penalty was death for doing this. So he gave them a practice run on that. But the Lord said, I'm going to go throughout Egypt. He wasn't going to exclude Goshen. If you did not obey my word and put that on your doorpost and in your lintel, then your firstborn could die. Pesach. So let's go over the meal. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. So this is the feast of the unleavened bread. On the first day of this feast of unleavened bread, you shall remove all leaven out of your houses. For if anyone eats what is leavened from the first day until the seventh day, throughout this period of the feast of unleavened bread, that person shall be cut off from Israel. And that's not anything that you wanted. You wanted to be a part of the community and have the Lord taking care of you. On the first day you shall hold a holy assembly, and on the seventh day a holy assembly. So you get together on the first day and on the seventh day of this feast of unleavened bread. No work shall be done on those days. Remember, that's what Sabbath meant. Cease, desist, no work. But an exception, no work shall be done on those days, but what everyone needs to eat, that alone may be prepared by you. So no work done, but you can prepare your meals, or what you're going to eat on those days. And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Now we talked about that term last week, about where he says something like it has already happened, but it hasn't yet. The Passover hasn't happened yet, but it will happen. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a statute forever. In the first month, the month of Nisan, from the 14th day of the month at evening, 14th day of the month at evening, and on every 14th day of the month, there's a full moon. First day of the month, new moon. They had a lunar calendar. You shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. So 14th to 21, that's actually 8 days. You count the first day and the last day. It's actually 8 days. 1 day is the Passover, and then the other 7 is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay. For 7 days, no leaven is to be found in your house. No, not only are you not to eat it, you're not even to have it in your house. You're supposed to search your house, get rid of the leaven. If anyone eats what is leavened, that person will be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is a sojourner or a native of the land. You shall eat nothing leavened in all your dwelling places. You shall eat only unleavened bread. Okay, so getting ready to call, getting ready to prepare for this. So, looks like Moses and Aaron have prepared for this by letting the elders of Israel they gave the word to the elders, and then the elders spread it out to the people. So then he calls the elders together, and he says, it's time. It is time. Go and select lambs for yourselves. Day 10. According to your clans. Pick the number you need for your clan, for the group that's going to be doing it. To make sure you have enough to eat to prepared lamb, and try to keep the waste to a minimum, because it's going to have to be burned the next day. And then kill the Passover lamb. That's on day 14. Take a bunch of hyssop. It's a plant. We'll see. Got a picture of that. And dip it in the blood that is in the basin. So we talked about the lamb, the head, the tail, the innards, but they did drain the blood because Israelites were not to eat blood. So dip the blood in the basin and touch the lintel and the 2 doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. None of you shall go out of the door of his house until morning. So does that pretty much nail it down that they did not leave that night?
The Passover curfew.
Yep. Would you want to go out? I'd stay in. The door's locked. None of you shall go out the door of his house until the morning, and at the morning you shall burn what is left over of the lamb. So there's hyssop. Looks like it would work as a brush. The 10th plague.
Warner, I was just thinking about all these small fires in Goshen.
Uh-huh.
What did, you wonder, what were the Egyptians thinking by seeing all this smoke?
Oh, for the
They weren't thinking anything, they were mourning the person.
Oh, yes.
well, when they were roasted the lamb,
Yes.
they probably think those Hebrews, they're having a barbecue and they didn't invite us. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on the throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon. Don't you feel sorry for those captives? Could some of them have been Israelites? Maybe they were slouching and making the bricks and they got put into the dungeon. They didn't have an opportunity to do the blood, so I don't know. I couldn't feel sorry for them. You think it's, you're stuck in the dungeon, maybe chains. How could it get any worse than this? And then all the firstborn of the livestock. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Then Pharaoh, he summoned Moses and Aaron by night and said, "Up, go out from among the people, both you and the people of Israel. Go, serve the Lord as you have said. Take your flocks and your herds, as you have said." Well, look at that. Repeats, as you have said. Well, what did he say? Well, look at that. "And be gone, and bless me also." So it sounds like in the night he calls for Moses and Aaron. Do they come? What did God say?
Can't leave your house.
Can't leave your house. And what was the last thing that Pharaoh said to Moses before this? Moses and Pharaoh's parting words following the 9th plague. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart after the 9th plague, and he would not let the people go. Then Pharaoh said to him, "Get away from me. Take care you never see my face again, for on the day you see my face, you shall die." Moses said, "As you say, I will not see your face again." So I don't think he comes. I think he receives the message, but he does not see Pharaoh again.
It's come a long way since them only wanting 3 days out in the desert.
Yeah? Well, we're going to look at that. Was he telling the truth? The Egyptians were urgent with the people. They wanted to get rid of them. Do you blame them? To send them out of the land in haste. We got the bread of haste, the lamb of haste, and sending them out of the land in haste. For they said, "We shall all be dead." So the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading bowls being bound up in their cloaks on their shoulders. I thought, do you think that's unusual? The people took their dough before it was leavened.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't supposed to leaven it. So it's were they going to leaven it? Is the only reason they didn't leaven it because they didn't have time? Keeping the Passover. Not everyone could keep it on the day. There were some certain men who were unclean through touching a dead body, so that they could not keep the Passover on that day. That would be the 14th of Nisan. And they came before Moses and Aaron and said, "We got a problem." And those men said to him, "We are unclean through touching a dead body," most likely, no fault of their own. "Why are we kept from bringing the Lord's offering at its appointed time among the people of Israel?" And Moses said to them, "Wait, that I may hear from the Lord what the Lord will command me concerning you." So You know, Moses usually had an answer. He didn't have an answer. This wouldn't be the first time. There were several times where Moses didn't have the answer for the people, and he goes to the Lord. So, we're unclean through touching a dead body. We want to celebrate the Passover. What do? The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, if any of you or your descendants is unclean through touching a dead body or is on a long journey, he shall still keep the Passover in the second month, on the 14th day of the month, at twilight, they shall keep it." So just keep the same day, just move it a month. They shall eat it with their unleavened bread and their bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it until morning, nor break any of its bones, We talk about that with Jesus on the cross. According to the statute of the Passover, they shall keep it. On a long journey, you'll keep it. What about New Testament times later, the exiles? They're essentially on a lifetime long journey. You know, you're on a long journey, you can't get back there in time. So there's a set day for them. But what if you're gone your entire life? Failure to keep the Sabbath, sojourners, and the Sabbath. But if anyone who is eligible, who is clean, and is not on the journey, fails to keep the Sabbath, that person shall be cut off from his people because he did not bring the Lord's offering at its appointed time. So even this lamb was for the people. The Lord still considered it his offering. This is the Lord's Passover. Offering at its appointed time. That man shall bear his sin for not attending. And if a stranger sojourns among you and would keep the Passover to the Lord according to the statute of the Passover and according to its rule, so shall he do it. Now, stranger sojourners were not required to do so, but they could if they wanted to. And I think there's also the requirement that they have to be circumcised. You shall have one statute both for a sojourner and the native. But what about lepers? Permanently unclean. Nothing is said about lepers. So I guess they can't take it. But priests who are lepers can't serve, but they can still eat the holy food. Keeping the Passover location to location. Can't just do it anywhere you are.
So, foreigners or sojourners, if they're male, be circumcised, they can come in, eat the meal, and be protected should they be a firstborn son or firstborn child.
We talked in a previous class a while back, I did, sojourner, Caleb. Caleb was not an Israelite. He was one of the other people. So you may offer the Passover sacrifice. You may not offer the sacrifice with any of your towns that the Lord your God has given you, but at the place that the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell in it. There you shall offer the Passover sacrifice in the evening, listen to this, in the evening at sunset at the time you came out of Egypt. So they leave Egypt at sunset. Now, obviously not on Passover night, because at sunset they're sacrificing a lamb there. So maybe the next day or whatever, but they do leave it at sunset. But remember, they got a full moon. So maybe that next day they're rounding up all their livestock, getting them ready to go, and then leave at sunset. You shall cook it and eat it at the place the Lord your God will choose. And in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. For 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the seventh day there shall be a solemn assembly to the Lord your God. You shall do no work on it. We're in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is written about 2 months before they crossed the Jordan. So they're getting ready to go into that new land. Then Solomon said, the Lord has said that he would dwell in thick darkness, but I have built you an exalted house, a place for you to dwell in forever. Then the king turned and blessed all the assembly. while the assembly of Israel stood. And he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, with whom his hand has fulfilled what he promised with his mouth to David, my father." So now he has a place to dwell. So this is where you need to keep the Passover. "Since that day that I brought my people out of the land of Egypt," that's the Passover day. "Since the Passover, I've chosen no city out of all the tribes of Israel in which to build a house," even though he had that tabernacle, "so that my name might be there. And I chose no man as prince over the people of Israel, but I have chosen Jerusalem as the place that my name may dwell, that my name may be there, and I have chosen David to be over my people Israel." And he's saying this, "I've chosen David," and he's saying this during the time of Solomon, David's son. Recorded Passover observances in the wilderness at Sinai, encamped at Gilgal. The next one is when they're crossing the Jordan. And then we go all the way till the 18th year of King Josiah's reign. Remember, they found the scrolls, they found the word of the law. So the first 17 years, and King Josiah was one of the later kings. And then King Hezekiah, maybe passing out an olive branch, he invites the northern kingdom to come down and celebrate it with them. Come down to Jerusalem. You know, we're brothers. We're all descendants of Abraham. Come down and celebrate the Passover with us. And then the exiles returning from Ezra, with Ezra from Babylon, they kept the Passover in Ezra 6:19. So, let's do an overview of the Exodus. God's objectives. He had 3 of them. 3 objectives, God. First one, release his people Israel from Egyptian bondage, from the hardships. Exodus 6:6. Second objective is Exodus 6:8. He wants to return Israel to the land that he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He told Abraham one night, "Go look upon the land. All this I'm going to give to you." So this is keeping God's promise that he made to Abraham about 430 years ago. The third promise, or the third objective, is to demonstrate to Pharaoh and to the people of Egypt that the Lord, Yahweh, was God, that he was stronger than Pharaoh, and that he was more powerful than the gods of the Egyptians. So Moses' request, like you said, Gordon, it wasn't, "Let my people go, we want to leave, we want to get out of here." It was for a short stay.
A long weekend.
Yeah, the Lord, the God of Israel, wanted his people to make a 3-day journey into the wilderness in order to hold a feast or a sacrifice to him. So that's what Moses asked for, Moses and Aaron. And then Pharaoh's concern. He had one concern. The people will be taken away from their work. Moses, you're just trying to get out of the work. You know, they go out 3 days. They have their sacrifice 2 or 3 days. They come back 3 days. You know, you've wasted 9 days. He's not concerned that they won't come back. He's certain that they're going to come back. He's just concerned about the waste of days. Pharaoh's response, what was that? You got to get your own straw. And of course, that Moses did not win any popularity contests with that. So then we start the plagues. First one, Nile turned into blood. Second one, frogs. They didn't like the blood, so they came out of the Nile. And then the Egyptian magicians were able to replicate plagues 1 and 2 with their secret arts. So maybe Pharaoh said, "Well, even my magicians can do that. That's just a magician's trick." Third plague, the dust of the earth in all of Egypt became gnats. The magicians could not replicate this one, and even they acknowledged that this was the finger of God. Plagues 1 through 3 affected all Egypt, including Goshen. Okay, let's go to 4. Swarms of flies upon the land. 4. Finish 4. God differentiated between Goshen and the rest of Egypt 4 plagues, 4 through 9. So until we get to the death of the firstborn, these will not happen to Goshen. Flies. And then Pharaoh gives in a little bit after the 4th one. He says, okay, Moses, go do your sacrifice, but don't go. Don't leave the land. Do it here. Moses says, well, we can't do it because these sacrifices would be abominable to the Egyptians because we are shepherds. He says, we must go into wilderness. We see this here when they came into the land. Joseph told his brothers to tell Pharaoh, he says, you know, you're shepherds, you keep sheep. And that was disgusting. Pharaoh, oh, I'm going to get rid of it. You go up to Goshen then to keep away from us. And Joseph had this in mind, to keep his people pure, keep them away from the Egyptian idolatry. Pharaoh says you may go into the wilderness, but don't go far. So he relents a little more, and then Moses prays to the Lord, and then the flies are removed, but then Pharaoh changes his mind. Plague 5, livestock died. Plague 6, people and beasts afflicted with boils. Plague 7, thunder and hail. Sometimes we forget about the hail, but it's thunder and hail in the land of Egypt. And then plague 8, locusts in the land. But before this happens, there was another meeting with Pharaoh. Pharaoh makes an offer to Moses. Okay, he's getting a little tired. Before the plague happened, he says that the men may go to sacrifice to the Lord, but you got to leave your children home. He's getting suspicious here. Oh, you're wanting to take everybody? I think maybe you're not planning on coming back. So just the men go. Moses and Aaron, he drives them out from his presence. And then the plague comes. Darkness in the land of Egypt, the 9th plague. During darkness, Pharaoh makes an offer to Moses that all the people may go, but the animals need to stay. And Moses said, well, how are we going to do these sacrifices if the animals stay here? All the animals must go because we don't know what God's going to want. We need to take everything just to be prepared. You know, we're Boy Scouts. We need to be prepared here. Moses states that, then this is where Pharaoh says, Moses, if I see your face again, I'm going to kill you. And Moses says, you will not see my face again.
In other words, you're through.
Yeah. So death of the firstborn. At midnight the Lord struck down all the firstborn in the land, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne. We said as to also those on those who were unlucky enough to be in the dungeon. Action was required on the part of the Israelites in Goshen. If you didn't do what the Lord commanded, your firstborn's going to die also. Blood of the sacrificial animals had to be placed on the lintel and the doorposts of the house. And then the Israelites were ordered to remain in their house until morning. I don't think I would have had a problem with that. Do you? You want to go out?
So they were sleeping in their clothes, ready to go.
Yeah, ready to go. And the people of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children, and a mixed multitude also went up with them. Now, one place they're called the rabble. These were the people that wanted the cucumbers and everything, but there were some good people. One of that mixed multitude, as I said, was Caleb. Also went up with them, and very much livestock, both flocks and herds. So all these people, and they're doing a cattle drive. And they baked unleavened cakes with the dough that they had brought out of Egypt, for it was not leavened because they were thrust out of Egypt, and they couldn't wait, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves. So, this is where they went. Here's Goshen up here, and here's Succoth right in there. Next week, Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost. Okay, that's it. Everyone get a copy of the handout? Thank you. Okay. She was. No, she said, hold the door for.
I knew somebody.
There you go.
One of us just came back, and he was walking over, she said, "Mother, is it open for Linnell?"
Well, I did. I let Linnell do it. I said, Dick, sorry, she didn't want the door.